This morning I'll be reading from Ruth 3, 9 through 13. Ruth 3, 9 through 13. And he said, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, if you are a close relative." And he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now, it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you. As the Lord lives, lie down until the morning."
We've been going through the book of Ruth the past few months, and we were going to cover this last week, Sunday evening, but who knew that our lesson went long, so we had to make a part one and part two. But in the book of Ruth, you have not only a love story, but a story of redemption. And ultimately, we will see this at the end of the book, Lord willing, next month. But as we've come up to this point, we've seen kind of a roller coaster of emotions with Naomi and Ruth. Once they meet Boaz, it seems like things are starting to look up, and they continue to look up. If you look in chapter 1, you see a man from Bethlehem by the name of Elimelech and his wife Naomi. They have two sons, and they see that there's a famine in the land, so to seek out food and provision for their own family, they leave and go to Moab, and Elimelech's two sons find their wives. And over a period of time, Elimelech passes away along with his two sons, and they are absolutely distraught. They are grieving and they are struggling. Naomi and her two daughters-in-law, she just calls them daughters, and she tells them, "There's no reason for you to come back with me. There's nothing here for me, and there's nothing there for you. Why don't you stay here, because I want you to live your life out. I want you to have a chance at finding somebody, because y'all are young enough. I'm past my days, and so I'm going to go back to my homeland and live out the rest of my days there." Well, one daughter remains, but the other one, by the name of Ruth, she says, "Look, I'm going to go with you, whether you like it or not. I love you too much. Your God is going to be my God. Your people are going to be my people. And where you die and are buried, I'm going to be buried there too. So there's nothing you can do or say that's going to keep me from going with you." And so from the very beginning, you see this idea of loyalty, even in times of struggle, in a time of grieving. And then in chapter 2, you see a glimmer of hope. In this glimmer of hope, there's a man by the name of Boaz. And he sees this lady working in his field, and he says, Who is she? I've never seen her before." And it wasn't uncommon to see foreigners glean from the field what was left over, what had fallen down from the workers. But Boaz had caught word of her reputation, that she was a good woman. She was a hardworking woman. She was a patient woman, an enduring woman, a woman that took care of those who were also grieving, even though she herself was facing loss. He says, "I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you some resources along to give back to Naomi, because I want y'all to be provided for." And he gives her roughly an estimate about a year's worth of food. Well, she comes back to Naomi, and Naomi is just, she has no idea what to think. "Where did you get all this? Where did you work today?" And Ruth says in chapter 2, "Well, I met a man by the name of Boaz." And you could almost see in the text Naomi's eyes just light up. "I know that man. He's a relative of my husband's. You should go back to him and see if we can get something worked out." Well, This is where chapter 3 takes place. In chapter 3, we see God's plan and custom. And I told Haley before I got up here, I really wish that my mother-in-law was here because I'm probably going to be referencing her a whole lot in this sermon in a good way. I have really good in-laws. I'm blessed to have good in-laws, very much like Ruth had with Naomi. And in reading chapter 3, I just couldn't stop laughing because of the similarities between Naomi and my mother-in-law and how much Naomi loved her family enough to conduct a plan of sorts to find their happiness. And it was in a similar way that she got Haley and I together, which is very, very interesting. If you look back at our history, Haley and I, Haley, she says that she didn't stalk me in the bushes, but I believe that she did when she found me. I myself, being oblivious and hard-headed for about 6-ish years, our mothers schemed together to get us together, and they were successful, as you can see. But I am thankful that they came together and saw that there is some potential here. Her mother saying he is a godly man, my mother seeing her saying she is a godly woman. They will work well together. This is what Naomi saw with Ruth and Boaz. Boaz, in this context, they are finishing up. Here's the context, here's the setting. Boaz and his workers have just finished the barley harvest. They have gotten all of their resources. They have just gleaned the field. They have separated the chaff from the wheat, and they are celebrating. They are happy, and they are coming to an end for the season. Naomi, in her wisdom and understanding, says, now is the time to send Ruth. In this sermon, in this chapter, in this 18-minute sermon, that's an inside joke for people over here, we are going to see godly counsel, verses 1 through 5. We are going to see godly conduct, verses 6 through 13. And we are going to see godly character, verses 14 through the end of the chapter, 14 through 18. And in each one of these, it's actually from different individuals from this text, but we can take Ruth, we can take Naomi, we can take Boaz, and just as Christians, for the general application, we can glean so much from this chapter of where to receive counsel, what kind of character we are to possess, what kind of conduct we should have. And in verses 1 through 5, let us look at godly counsel. In verses 1 through 5, it says this, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Oh, wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. She said to her, all that you say I will do. In verses 1 through 2, under this godly counsel from Naomi, 1 through 2, we have familial and motherly counsel. Familial and motherly counsel. In verse 1, helping to find rest. Notice what she says, my daughter, shall I not seek security? Shall I not seek rest for you? This idea of don't be worried, don't be anxious anymore. You can find peace. Well, this goes all the way back to Ruth chapter 1 and verse 9. May the Lord grant you that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. You can see from when they were about to depart, all the way up to this point, the present time, Ruth has not stopped thinking, or Naomi has not stopped thinking about Ruth and trying to find peace for her. They're still grieving. How do we know that? Well, if you look at verse 2, hope in the faithful Redeemer. In the context of this, it's very interesting how she has this completely planned out. If you look at how she starts out, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you that you may dwell with you?" Ruth, how can I sit back and not do anything for you? How can I sit back knowing that there's something that I can do to help you out and not do anything? How can I sit back knowing that I can help you find rest and seek a time of peace and not do it? So, this is what I'm going to do, Naomi says. I'm not going to sit back and do nothing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some instruction. I need you to do the following because there is hope in this Redeemer. Now, she says, "Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight." You know Ruth was probably thinking about Boaz, probably daydreaming about her time that she was in the fields with this man, thinking, man, he's such a good man, but how will I ever, wondering, how will this ever happen? Perhaps this. And then Naomi says, I'm going to make this happen. I am going to put you two together where y'all can have a conversation. Now, this is where I wish my mother-in-law was here. This is how she got us together. I'll send her the link to this because I'm not going to say this behind her back. I talk about this all the time. She literally locked me in a car so that we could have a conversation about her daughter. When we were in school, we were a big group of us from church were going out to eat, and very strategically, she says, "Anthony, can you ride with me? Because I don't know where we're going." And I've been in Austin for a time. I was like, "Yeah, sure." Me being oblivious, I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, I'll guide you over there. And so while we're there, it's super quiet, and she's not saying anything. And I'm like, okay, let's see if I can start a conversation. And of course, I start. We got something in common. Haley is in my class, and Haley is her daughter. So let's talk about Haley. Well, this was her plan. And I said, well, how is Haley doing? Is she liking school? And she says, well, yeah, there's actually somebody that she really enjoys being around in school. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, I know what this is about now. And then I realized we're not going in the direction that I told her to go. And we end up at the opposite side of town. And then she is in a parking lot and locks the door and then gives me a lecture on how great her daughter is. She had planned all of this out from the beginning. And it worked. Well, Naomi had planned all of this out. Notice the details in all of this plan. Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were with? Behold, he winnows barley in the threshing floor tonight. How does she know his day in and day out? How does she know where he's going to be that night? Well, let's keep reading. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not, now notice this, now I'm going to give you some instruction. He's going to be there, but you got to do A, B, C, and D in order for all of this to work. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was wise in her conduct. She saw potential. She saw redemption, and guess what? She executed it perfectly. In verses 3 through 5, we have from mourning to courting. Mourning to courting. Now, notice we have to read everything in Scripture according to its context, but especially when we're dealing with books such as the book of Ruth, we have to look at the cultural context. Now, notice what she says. Now, remember, real quick, preface this. Remember how we said that they're still going through a mourning process? How do we know that? Well, notice at the beginning, shall I not seek security for you? Ruth didn't feel secure. Well, how could she? There was nobody to provide for. It was her and Naomi caring for each other. How are they going to get through the next day? And also, notice this, verse 3, wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes. We see this today at times as well. When somebody is mourning, usually they will wear black. They will wear darker clothes. It's very prominent, especially at the viewing. But in the culture at that time, to show that they were still in mourning and uh, they didn't want to go through and really find anybody at the time, and they were still going through something, they would wear specific articles of clothing. They would not follow necessarily the societal norms of washing. They were going through a grieving process, and you actually see this with even kings. They would rent their clothes and put a sackcloth on and ash on their heads to show that they are going through a time of mourning. Ruth was going through a time of mourning. And Naomi says, look, you don't have to mourn anymore. There is hope. Wash yourself, put your best clothes on, show that you are no longer mourning and that you are ready to start dating again. Why would Ruth do such a thing? Well, because Boaz was a godly man. He showed potential. He showed righteousness. He showed redemption. He showed hope for the family. In verses 3 through 4, healing and washing. Go wash yourself. 2 Samuel chapter 12, David was mourning and washed up, changed clothes to indicate that he was done mourning. In Genesis 19, 30 through 38, Lot was going, we see the context of Lot was taken advantage by his daughters, and it was a very terrible situation. Why am I bringing this up all of a sudden? Well, remember, who was Ruth? Ruth was a Moabite. Ruth was somebody that her culture was seen as a very terrible and disgusting people. Even their origin from their people came out of an ancestral relationship. And so it's very interesting. I'm kind of getting ahead of my notes here. What Naomi is doing is she is setting Ruth up to not only redeem her and the family within the Jewish culture, she is helping Ruth redeem her reputation from the Moabite nation. Because if you look at Lot and Ruth and the situation that happens there were many things that could have happened that didn't. And there are things that could have happened with Lot and his daughters that did. And because of what happened there, Ruth came about and her people. We see not only a redemption of a Jewish family, we see a redemption of a Gentile. Now, why is this important? This is important because of Ruth chapter 4 and verses 18 and following. Now, I know we're not in chapter 4. We'll get to that next month. But everything points to the end of this book. Now, these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Amminadab, and to Amminadab was born Nahshon, and Nahshon Solomon, and Solomon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David. Now it would be through David and his bloodline and the kingdom of Judah that the Messiah would come. And if you remember in our Bible class this morning, the book of Zephaniah, the book of Haggai and Zechariah prophesying about who would dwell in the temple. And in the book of Zephaniah, how not just Jew and Gentile will be condemned for their sins, but they will also be redeemed from their sins, both Jew and Gentile, under one family through the Messiah. This was all planned out, not necessarily by Naomi. This was all planned out by God. If you read in Ephesians chapter 1, before the foundation of the world, he planned this. Now, I am not alluding to or suggesting that Naomi was talked to by God. I'm talking about in a general application of the plan of salvation. God uses people. God uses mankind to bring about his will. Naomi had a plan, but God had a greater plan. Naomi had a godly plan, but this plan was from God, the one that is called the church. And if you read about this healing and washing in verses 3 and 4, we see in the purpose in all of this, verse 5, to heed the wisdom from the wise counsel. Look at verse 5. Notice what it says. It says, she said to her, Ruth, that is, Ruth said to her, all that you say, I will do. What if Ruth said, much like Anthony Scherffius to his mother and now mother-in-law, I don't want to do that. I want to do this my way. I want to go about it my way. Well, you know what? If I had just heeded wise counsel, I probably would have eliminated a lot of stress and heartbreak in my life. Spiritually speaking, what if we don't heed the wise counsel? What is our wise counsel? The scriptures. What if we read God's plan and say, I want to do it my way? Well, we're going to receive a lot of heartbreak and pain. Ruth didn't do that. Ruth said, I'm going to heed the wise counsel. She realized that this was obviously a very delicate situation, and it needed to be handled as such. What if Boaz is not the moral person they think that he is? What if Boaz thinks she is acting like a loose woman, a strange woman, as the Proverbs writer would say in Proverbs chapter 7, going to him in the middle of the night, doing all of these things, while Boaz, well, what are you doing? Well, I don't know if Boaz is going to do this. Well, Naomi, I don't know if your plan is going to work. She didn't question the plan. She trusted in Naomi. What if it just, what if it was taken the wrong way and it just became awkward between Boaz and Ruth? There's a lot of what ifs that I have a whole lot of what ifs that are here, but you get the idea. What if? What if? What if? You know, we don't live in a world of what ifs. We live in a world of what is. And yes, we don't know what the future holds, but we do know who holds the future. And rather than questioning the plan, what should we do? We should trust the plan giver. We need to be trusting God and his plan, just in the same way that Ruth trusted Naomi and her plan. But notice, it only worked because Ruth did as she said. All of this I will do. Not some of it, not part of it, all of it. I will listen to your wise counsel. I will follow your instruction to the T, and I will do as you say. Can you imagine if every Christian actually said that to God and followed through? Oh, how great of a world this would be. Rather than saying, well, this plan works, but I don't know if this is going to work. Ruth didn't do that. And because she was obedient and trusted Naomi, look at what we find in verses 6 through 13. Godly conduct. The plan was not simply to get Ruth with Boaz. It was to show Boaz that Ruth had godly conduct. And we'll see that in the text. In verses 6 through 8, we have the harvesters retire. The harvesters retire, verses 6 through 8. Now, this is very important for the entire setting because verses 6 through 8 is the setting. Okay. Now, Naomi has already made mention of the cultural setting. My daughter, shall I not seek security? Verse 1. Verse 2. Now is not Boaz our kinsman with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. So we know the context now, where all of this is going to take place. This is very important. Why is this important? Well, number one, because God put it here. But number two, in order to understand what takes place between Boaz and Ruth, we have to understand what was actually happening in the environment, in the location. Here is the setting. They were at the threshing floor. Okay, the threshing floor was a flat, elevated area where grain was separated from chaff. During harvest season, it became the center of community activity and celebration. Landowners often slept there to protect their grain from theft during this vulnerable time. Winnowing typically occurred in the evening when breezes helped separate grain from chaff, and the process was followed by celebration of eating, creating a festival-type atmosphere. So this is what's going on. Naomi knows that they're coming to an end with their harvest festival, with the barley harvest. And she knows that they're up there separating the wheat from the chaff, and they're making a festival out of it. They've got a celebration. There's food, there's wine, there's fellowship. Everybody's filled and happy. And she says, now is the time to do this. Now, why did Naomi choose this time? Well, Remember the setting. Boaz is happy. Boaz is successful. Boaz is filled with food. Boaz is rested. You ever heard the old saying, "The way to the man's heart is through his stomach"? Naomi understood this. Okay. Naomi knew everything has to take place perfectly in order for this to come out perfectly. Ruth, you have to do as I say. Follow these instructions. Make sure these things take place before you actually have a conversation with them. In a very similar way, is that not what God did with the church? Did God not say these things must take place in order for this to have a perfect outcome? What if Naomi sent Ruth too early or too late? It may or may not have happened the way that it did. But again, we're not dealing in what ifs, we're dealing in what is. Naomi knew how to go about this. God, in his infinite wisdom, understood, I need to work through this plan perfectly. And he does. From Genesis to Revelation, we see God's providential plan and providential care through everything to bring about the Messiah to fulfill his promise from the very beginning in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. The promise that even though there will be a war between his seed and her seed, Satan's followers and Christ's followers, Christ, even though he may die, he is going to absolutely demolish Satan to a point where he's not going to be able to recover from it. And Ruth and Boaz and Naomi play a huge part in that plan. Can you imagine your love life playing a part in bringing about the Messiah? You know, we don't think about it that way. We don't think about how in our lives, the smallest part of our lives, the decisions that we make, the interactions that we have, the conversations that we partake in, can contribute positively or negatively to the will of God. Now, I'm not saying in the negative that we're going to prevent God's will. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this: we can't stop God's will. We are playing a part in it whether we like it or not. It's our decision whether we are wanting to try and further his will or God is going to use us to carry about his will whether we like it or not. It can be something as small as, well, I say as small, it's big to us, but in the grand scheme of things, my love life has no bearing on somebody on the other side of the world. Well, because of this redemption, because of this relationship, David came about. And because David came about, guess who eventually came about? Jesus the Christ. God saw providentially the plan of how all of this needs to take place. And Ruth heeded wise counsel. Now, with all of this being said, let's get into verses 6 and 7. Strategy and submission, verses 6 through 7. And let's see, verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. He has successfully followed the pattern that Naomi has given her. Boaz is happy. He is content. He is full of food. He is resting. He is successful. Everything is playing out perfectly. Now, this is where Ruth comes in. Notice this. If you read this passage, at least for me, I'm not going to speak for you. For me, I was very confused on why on earth remove the blanket from his feet. Is that not the question? Why the feet? Why? Why can't you just shove him? Wake him up. Just shove him. Why are you laying it? Why are you uncovering his feet? It's so strange. Well, remember, culture. Even in the New Testament, what did the feet symbolize? If you washed feet, it symbolized humility. If you look at the Jewish household in the first century, you saw that the one that washed the feet, that took care of the feet, was the lowest servant in the entire household. And what is it that Jesus did? Jesus washed feet, proving his humility. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 and following. Well, in doing this, there's actually a couple of reasons why this might have happened. One, it does show humility. Now, if you look at the Hebrew here, there are some translations in in the Hebrew, how this can be taken as uncovered in a sensual way, in a way that very similarly how Lot's daughters did to him. But remember the contrast here. Ruth is redeeming not just Naomi, she's redeeming herself here and really her people. Look, I'm not like the Moabites. I'm not going to do these things. But she did uncover his feet and sat next to him or lay down next to him, next to his feet. It showed humility. And also, where were they? Where were they? Where's the setting? They're at the threshing floor, where in the evening it is supposed to be the windiest time of the day. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm comfortable in my bed and then my blankets come up off my feet, what's going to happen? I'm going to wake up. Well, imagine a man who is successful, he is godly, he is full of food and happy, he is all of these things, and he wakes up and finds a beautiful woman at his feet, humbly laying there. Well, this was Naomi's plan. Naomi knew the kind of character Ruth had. She knew her conduct. And actually, it wasn't just Naomi that knew this, it was Boaz and all of the people that knew this. How do we know that? Well, look at this. Look at the text. Let's keep reading. Verse 8, startled by a slave. In verse 8 it says, it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. Let's keep reading. Verses 9 through 11, the humble request. It says, he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. Some translations will say, your slave. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. Then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask. Notice this, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Many people knew the conduct and character of Ruth. Now let's break this passage down. Verse 9, Ruth's major request. Ruth's major request. This was a massive request from Ruth. This is why it had to be done in a very delicate way. In verse 9, notice even the terminology she uses. She puts providential care into her terminology. Spread your wings over your servant. Where did that come from? Why did she use that type of language? Look back at chapter 2 and verse 12. In chapter 2 and verse 12, notice what it says. Now this is Boaz talking to Ruth. May the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. She's using Boaz's words against him, essentially. She says, now you wanted me to seek shelter under the wing of God. I want you to do the same for me. It almost seems as if she is saying, perhaps, maybe this could be God's plan. Perhaps you are the Redeemer. Perhaps you can redeem me and Naomi. And notice what Boaz's response was in Ruth's mighty reputation, verses 10 through 11. This last kindness is better than the first because she chose the wiser choice rather than the desired choice. Now, I've always wondered what was the age difference between Ruth and Boaz. Boaz alludes to the age gap here. He doesn't give a specific age gap. There's some tradition in the Jewish culture that I believe the Jewish, and this is not inspired at all. I'm not saying that this is what it is. I'm just saying the Jewish culture, they would say that Boaz was probably around 80 and Ruth was around 40. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what Jewish culture says. However, we do know that there was a substantial age gap here because notice what Boaz says. He says, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better first than the last, not going after young men, whether poor or rich. He says, wow, you could have chosen anybody. You could have gone after goodly men, young men, men who were strong and handsome, whether they were poor or rich, but you didn't do that. You chose wisdom over really desire. And you know what? If you recall back in, I think it's chapter 1, maybe chapter 2, we made the parallels between the virtuous woman and Ruth. What is something that is said at the very end of Proverbs chapter 31? That beauty is vain. What was it that Ruth did not search for? She didn't care about the outward. She didn't care about the finding a young man that was handsome. She wanted somebody that was godly. And Boaz says, you have chosen correctly. Your priorities are straight. You are wise in your decision making because you seek after somebody rather than just being young. You want somebody who's godly. That's what you search for. And then we see the reputation. Not only do you have a reputation of wanting godly things over in the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. I got it this time. All three. He said, I don't just know it. Naomi is not the only one that knows it. Everybody knows this, Ruth. You are somebody that everybody looks to and says, that is a godly woman. And then you have verses 12 to 13, the honest response. What I love about Boaz is that he doesn't get her hopes up, but he reassures her, but he reassures her in an honest way. Notice what he says. Now it is true, verse 12, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Yes, it is the case that I can redeem you, but I'm not the first in line. There's somebody else that really has the responsibility of doing this first. Verse 12, Boaz was honest and knew the law. The law of Moses says the next in line, the kinsman redeemer is the one that's next in line. Boaz was not next in line. By him overthrowing the authority of the other kinsman and taking her for himself, he would have transgressed the law of Moses and proven himself to be somebody that was not at all what Naomi told everybody that he was, especially Ruth. He says, look, I'm more than happy to do this, but we got to go about it the right way. And then verse 13, Boaz was respectful and knew his place. Boaz was respectful and knew his place. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. He said, look, I know my place. I know your place. I'm not going to overstep. I'm not going to... Notice how he starts it out. You are a woman of reputation. I don't want to slander that. I don't want to put a black smudge on your reputation just because I went over somebody else. And you've worked so hard to do this. For my safety and your safety, we're going to go about this the proper way. I really wish that everybody had this mindset, generally speaking, when approaching marriage. Going about it the right way. Doing every step the way God has intended the step to be. Don't overstep. Don't get the order mixed up. You know, in our culture today, they would have seen this, even in their day, in the time of the judges, they would have seen this as an opportunity to fulfill desires, and nobody would have known. And they would have been able to keep their reputation. They would have been able to keep their reputation and fulfill desires, at least for a while. Boaz says, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do any of this. We're going to go about this the proper way. I will redeem you if it's the Lord's will. If he redeems you, then that's God's will. But we're going to go about it the proper way. Now look at verses 14 through 18. Godly character. In verses 14 through 15, notice what it says. So she lay at his feet until morning, and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Again, he said, give me the cloak that is on you and hold it. So she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. Now let's dissect this passage real quick. Verse 14, protecting a reputation. Now remember, in the middle of the night, he just said, everybody knows that you have a good reputation. And according to the context, nothing happened. But that doesn't stop people from talking. You know, it's very easy to have seen Ruth at Boaz's feet, even though they perhaps weren't even touching each other. They were just in proximity to each other. But you know what people love to do? People love, without realizing it, or maybe they do realize it, they love to ruin reputations. Anything that has a good story. Did you hear that Boaz, the godly man, a man that has a good reputation, he slept with a Moabite last night? It's just like those Moabites. Even their ancestors came about in the same way, in an ancestral relationship between daughters and their father. It's awful, and now it's leaked into our culture, even though nothing happened. Boaz said, we're going to make sure that we keep the reputations clean as they are. Why would Boaz say to keep their visit a secret? To protect Ruth's reputation, number 1. To avoid gossip, number 2. Maintain discretion, number 3. Focus on the redeeming plan, number 4. Number 5, cultural sensitivity. And number 6, strategic timing. In the same way that Naomi was wise, Boaz was also very wise. He understood, if we're going to go about this, we need to go about this the proper way. And what I like about Naomi's plan is she got Ruth to be with Boaz in a place that was semi-public. It wasn't like they were in a bedroom together with the doors closed. They were in the open, but there was still some privacy in the area where they could have a conversation. If you looked at the setup of the threshing floor, it was where people communed. There was fellowship there. It was just in the middle of the night where people were resting. And so Naomi knew, I need to get them to have a conversation in private, but I don't want them to ruin their reputation. Boaz says, we're not going to ruin a reputation. We need to go about this the proper way. You go back home. I'll deal with this business with the other kinsman redeemer, and then I will let you know what happens. Verse 15, providing for Ruth and Naomi. One commentary said this, as a proper gentleman, Boaz did not send Ruth home empty-handed. Not having any chocolates, he gave her 6 handfuls of grain. Every time Boaz encounters Ruth, he's providing in some way, shape, or form. He's proving himself to be a good redeemer, a good provider, a good potential husband even. And not only does he give enough for her, he gives enough for her and Naomi. I don't want you going empty-handed. I want you to have some for you and Naomi. Boaz is taking into account there are some that cannot provide for themselves. And if I have the means to do it, I'm going to do it. And notice this, he doesn't know if he's going to be able to redeem her or not. He doesn't know if she's going to be his wife, but he still helps them out anyway. This truly shows the character of Boaz. And then you have verses 16 through 17. You just might get to Bienenberger. You just might. In verses 16 to 17, notice what it says. Boaz was a respectful man. In verse 16, notice what it says, 16 through 17. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her. She said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, my daughter, he said, my daughter, until you, I'm skipping. For he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. I'll get it here in a second. This is where we see that Boaz is providing not just for Ruth, but he's also thinking about Naomi. He knows that even though Ruth is no longer mourning, Naomi probably still is mourning. And in verse 16, again, this is where I really wish that my mother-in-law was here, because I can just hear, this is where I started laughing. I could just hear my mother-in-law asking this to my now wife before we were married. I can hear her saying this. How did it go, my daughter? Do you know in the Hebrew what this literally means? The King James renders this perfectly. Naomi asked, "Who art thou, my daughter?" Literally in the Hebrew, Ruth, who are you? Do you know what she's asking? Are you Mrs. Boaz yet? Has the plan worked? Well, guess what Ruth says. Let me tell you about it. He's amazing. He provides. He's nice. He's respectful. He thinks of my reputation. He's going about it in the proper way. In verse 16, we see investigating. In verse 16 through 17, we see the information. What Boaz did, he protected her, he reassured her, and he provided for her and her mother-in-law. And now we get to verse 18. Boaz was a reliable man. He was a respectful man, verses 16 and 17, but he was also a reliable man. Boaz did not lead Ruth on. If you look at verse 18, notice what Naomi says. Then she said, "Wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today." Trust in Boaz. Boaz can be trusted to get this job done. Just sit back. You've done your part. Let Boaz do his. This is one of the greatest chapters in the entire book, because you see a plan gone about in a very strategic and delicate way, but it's done in a godly way. And it's concerning a potential marital relationship. This is a very beautiful chapter, because not only does it talk about a love story, a love account, a historical account that took place hundreds of years ago, this is a type of the church and Jesus the Christ. A people that is known for a disgusting and terrible backstory now has a chance at hope with a kinsman redeemer who is loving, respectful, providing, and will do anything and won't stop until the job is done. And all we have to do is trust in him, because he can be trusted. Ruth is a type of the church where, even though made up of people, a terrible backstory of origin, has proven themselves through loyalty and respect and submission, through humility to the kinsman redeemer, requesting, "Please, you're the only one, you're the one that can do this, but it has to be done in the proper way." God understands this. God had a plan of his own, and he executed it perfectly. He said, "I've got a kinsman redeemer that I'll send, but it has to be at the right time. It has to be at the proper moment, at the right place, and it has to be done strategically." And all of it was carried out providentially by God, to the point where we don't have to wait to know if Jesus can redeem us. We know that already. He died for us. What we're waiting for now is his return. And we have to wait patiently. We don't know when he's coming back. We don't know what the day and hour is. We have to follow the same advice that Ruth was given. Wait. Wait until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. I don't know if Jesus is going to come back today. I don't know if he's going to come back in the next 5 seconds, 5 months, 5 years, 5,000 years. I don't know. But what I can know is that he is trustworthy, and that he is not stopping until he gets his bride back. So I've got a question for us. How are we supposed to wait? Not necessarily in the manner, but in the conduct. What kind of conduct and character are we supposed to have? What kind of counsel should we receive while waiting on our kinsman redeemer to take us home? We need to have godly counsel. Seek the scriptures. What does the scriptures say about our kinsman redeemer? What does the scripture say about going about approaching the kinsman redeemer? We have to approach God in spirit, because God is spirit. He must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. We have to know how to do that. How do we do that? Seek wise counsel. Seek it from the scriptures. And if we seek wise counsel from the scriptures, we can know how to have godly conduct and godly character, to where it is seen by everybody, but not for the purpose of glorifying ourselves, but our Father who is in heaven. And also so that our kinsman redeemer may say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. I've seen what you've done. Your reputation speaks volumes. And because you have this reputation, guess what I'm going to give you? I'm going to give you a reward that is unlike any other. Why don't you come with me?" Well, why don't you go with him? You can go with him by being baptized for the remission of your sins, giving your life over to him, being a living sacrifice, humbling yourself, bowing down before his feet, saying, "Please redeem me." And you don't have to wait for a response from him, because he's already said, "I've come to seek and save that which is lost." All you need to do is be obedient to the gospel and the commands, if you so love him. John chapter 14 and verse 15. And if you want to do that this morning, you can do that now, as together we stand and as we sing.